Our panelists will help us gain an understanding of how non-dilutive capital can actually surpass the value of private investment when driving hardware innovation with national security applications. So on our esteemed panel for this time, we have Tex Schenken, who is the director at the National Security Innovation Capital, as well as Abigail Desjardins, who is the Acceleration Portfolio Director at NSIN. And finally, joining me in the room today, streaming with me, is Mr. Rich Julian, the Public Sector VC and Startups Lead for National Security and Space at Amazon Web Services. Now I'm going to move out of the way and let them take it away.
Thank you so much. Welcome, guys. So let's talk a little bit today about the hardware innovation conundrum for investors. So hardware, the time to develop it is time consuming. You have to design, build, test again, rinse and repeat until you get things right. You face more regulatory controls than other types of developments. And that goes double for the defense domain. You have multiple dependencies from your raw materials to components, and you have your supply chain in and your supply chain out. It's very capital intensive, not just capital, but upfront capital. And as you heard already, let's not forget what capital you take is important. Because of this, the hardware market tends to be dominated by established players, especially in the defense community. The conundrum to that is that innovation is being driven by smaller players. Their risk appetite is far higher. They're able to rapidly pivot and shift. They embrace capabilities early, whether you're talking about emerging methods, 3D printing, additives, composites, extrusion, you name it, or to leverage new technologies like cloud, modeling and simulation, AI/ML, industrial IoT, and automation. But these companies need to raise capital to enter this market and compete. So how do we ensure that they have access to trusted capital? This is a key problem we have to do. And it's a national security imperative that we leverage them, not just for the US government and the defense components, but for the defense industrial based partners too. How do we do this? Luckily enough, Tex here is going to be able to talk us through how we can take some of the investment in the National Security Innovation Capital to help get things started and get the ball rolling, which is obviously the key part when getting into the Defense Department. And then Abby's going to talk a little bit about how we are engaging with these innovative companies and bringing them and helping them understand the challenges faced by our mission customers. With that, I'd like to toss over to Tex and Abby to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you're doing today.
Great. Thanks, Rich. Glad to be here with everybody. I wish I could be with you in person in Austin, Texas, my hometown, but we'll have to make do with this virtual stage. I'm going to give you just a very brief perspective on how NSIC and Ensign and DIU, if you were in the previous discussion, fit together. And then I'll talk a little bit more about National Security Innovation Capital. So there are really three components to DIU, and this shows you conceptually what we focus on, although these lines are a little bit blurred and fuzzy. The core DIU activities start really with a DoD customer in mind, someone who has a problem that they're trying to solve, looking for a commercial solution, and then DIU goes out to the commercial world, to the startup world in particular, to find solutions that may fit. On the other end of the spectrum is National Security Innovation Network, which you may know best through Hacking for Defense. Abby will talk a lot more about the programs there, but really working very upstream with brand new startups, with academics, with students, getting them engaged in working with the Defense Department. NSIC, National Security Innovation Capital, sits kind of in the middle. We really focus on startups that are already incorporated. They are at very, very early stages in their development to the point where they are about to produce product in volume, but have not yet shipped any products. So that's where we fit. We're all part of the same organizational entity within the Department of Defense. So let me talk a little bit more just about National Security Innovation Capital. We're a new initiative that we just got authorized in 2019 and got our first appropriation in this fiscal year 21. We focus exclusively on hardware startups, and we are really working on enabling dual use hardware startups to make progress in their product development by addressing the shortfall of this private investment from trusted sources. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So our mission is to accelerate the development of dual-use hardware technologies that are critical to both national security and economic competitiveness. And I want to keep emphasizing that our program evaluates companies on the basis of the potential for success in commercial markets as well as in defense applications. And eventually what we hope to have accomplished is to really help stimulate a lot more companies that provide products and services to national security and national competitiveness. So we're focused on hardware technologies, dual-use applications, and on addressing problems that companies face in getting trusted, timely capital. This has been a big problem in that, as Rich mentioned, hardware is hard, hardware is risky, the technology takes longer to develop and a lot more money, and that's not as attractive to the private venture capital markets. So VCs, while there are private VCs that do put money into hardware, there aren't anywhere near as many as there used to be, and the dollar flow as a percentage is much lower, and in particular at the earliest stages. That's left the door open for adversarial capital. By that we mean money that flows from organizations that fundamentally represent national government interests of China or Russia or Iran or other countries. And the net result of that is the startup company that takes that money often just simply has their IP stripped out of them and they get run into the ground. So we try to step in for selected hardware startups, provide them with funding in the form of prototype development contracts. This is under other transaction authority. And we're just simply providing it to help the company get their product development done as quickly as possible. And it's non-dilutive. So you don't give up any equity when you take funds from NSIC. And we find that this has been very attractive to the companies that we have worked with. We're looking to continue what we've started this year. This is a list of the technologies, the broad areas of interest that we're engaged in. What I would suggest is that if you have something in one of these areas, you could go to nsic.mil, which is our website, and look at how our process actually works and the opportunities that you might have. Just briefly about me, I come to this not as someone who has spent a career in the US government. I spent 30 years in Silicon Valley doing hardware and software systems for companies ranging from Fortune 100 to startups. So I come at this with a very strong interest in the well-being of our portfolio companies, emphasizing their success on the commercial side, and then trying to identify how this will be applicable in defense uses. So with that, I think what I'll do is turn it over to you, Abby, and I'll try to run the slideshow here on your behalf.
Thank you, Tex. And thanks, Rich, for the great opening comments. Tex, if you can go to the next slide for me. So as mentioned, I am the Acceleration Portfolio Director here at Ensign. For those of you unfamiliar with Ensign, our mission is to bring networks of innovators and problem solvers to generate new solutions to national security problems. This is based on a fundamental belief and assumption that we're in a complex, rapidly advancing world, and the rate of change within the Department of Defense is no longer keeping pace with the adversaries. We believe that if we, the Department of Defense, want to maintain resilience, leverage emerging technologies, and solve problems differently, then we need to incorporate new problem solvers. Thus, all of our activities at Ensign are focused on tapping into communities of problem solvers who have typically been out of reach by the department. We sit at that nexus between the Department of Defense, academia, and the venture community. And as you can see by the graphic on the right-hand side of the slide, we are geographically dispersed. We have 11 regions across the United States with headquarters here in Arlington, Virginia. Next slide. We have the regional network team, as I mentioned, that's in the 11 regions. Each region has a regional director who is responsible for understanding the ecosystem of the entire region. And then each of the regions have a subset of folks called university program directors who are responsible for developing out the regional ecosystems. We currently have 17 university program directors, although we have relationships with an additional 30 plus universities across the United States. On the other side of the house, we have the program team from which I sit. We have 3 portfolios. We have the National Service Portfolio, which creates pathways to inject new talent into the Department of Defense. We have the Collaboration Portfolio, where Hacking for Defense sits, which is really about integrating new communities of problem solvers. And then within the Acceleration Portfolio, we work with, and in some cases develop, dual-use early-stage ventures to address capability gaps within the Department of Defense. Next slide, please. Across all 3 portfolios, our programming spans the technology readiness level. As you can see, we have quite a few programs. Those that fall within the Acceleration Portfolio are marked in red. I will not go into detail on these programs as Ensign is actually sponsoring the day tomorrow. So there's a bunch of tracks where you can get more information on some of our programs and some of our portfolios. But as you can see, the bulk of our programming really sits within that 4 to 6 TRL, ultimately with the goal of helping to advance solutions to a point where the Department of Defense can leverage them, along with helping to change the way the Department of Defense ideates on problems and thinks about new ways of doing business. Next slide, please. So what has our result been to date? In the past 3 years, although we have been in existence for almost 5, October 14th will be our 5th year anniversary. We have helped over almost 670 DoD organizations solve 753 problems, generating over 1,000 unique solutions. Of those problems, roughly 30% of them require a hardware-based solution, and that is probably low. But I did want to call that out as something that may be of interest to this particular group of folks dialing in today. I won't go into all the detail here on the slide, but as you can see, we've had some pretty significant impact just in the last 3 years of the data collection here represented in this graphic. Next slide, please. So what about specifically the Acceleration Portfolio? So for the last fiscal year of FY21, which we just have a few days left of the fiscal year, 40% of the teams and ventures that we have worked with have a hardware-based solution. We have a variety of solutions that emerged over the last year. Some of them came out of technology from Department of Defense labs. Some of them came from Hacking for Defense teams that then matured into ventures. But all of them received curriculum educating them on how to do business with the Department of Defense and various compliance issues that they may encounter as they try to do business with the department. It's really critical in our pathway to engage with these teams because they are at a pivotal time in their maturation and solution development. They sit at this nexus of making decisions between the speed and cost of the development of their solution and the security of their supply chain. And we saw this firsthand with one of the teams that we worked with as part of one of our academic accelerator programs. They had to make a very hard decision to not accept government funding to help advance the state of their solution because it was going to require a modification to their configuration of their system to allow them to use a US-based foundry. That was just going to take too much time, and in the best interest of their venture, they made a decision to pivot away from that as potential and to instead go with a non-US based foundry. And this is something that is super important, but it is critical that the role that Ensign plays in helping them to understand the deliberative choice that they are making, and also help the Department of Defense understand where those critical gaps are in the US supply chain so that we could potentially invest in companies to help fill those gaps. I believe those are all my talking points that I have. The next slide just has my contact information. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. But I will also tell you, if you are interested in reaching out to your regional contact, we have a fantastic page on our website. It's listed there. It's Our Regions. It has the breakdown of who the representatives are from the regional network team for your particular region, along with their contact information. So they are a very awesome first point of contact for Ensign, but I'm also happy to take any questions or any directs to me. Thank you very much.
Great. And then I can do a quick public service announcement. Do tune in tomorrow for the NSIN track and hear more specifically about NSIN and how they're going about doing what they're doing. Well, thank you both. So Tex, this is a really fantastic offering that NSIC is bringing to bear in a critical area that's spanning that gap and trying to draw the interest from the venture investors to help them get the hardware companies get into there. Can you give us some examples of investments and activities that you guys have done to date?
Yeah, so we received our first appropriation from Congress this fiscal year 21. We got $15 million, and we launched our website at the beginning of March. In the course of the subsequent months, we received 100 submissions from different companies. We ultimately down selected to 9 companies that we put on contract, and we just wrapped up the last of those last week. They range from very early stage, a couple of them have just recently been incorporated, to some companies that are fairly close to shipping sample quality products in preparation for full production. A couple of examples you saw on that last slide that I showed the different areas of technology interest. So in one case, we have helped to fund a company that's developing a quantum-based antenna. It's a remarkable technology, and it will have enormous potential benefits in both academic and research facilities, as well as in commercial applications and in defense applications, because it holds the potential to be able to scan a very wide range of frequencies simultaneously and to identify directionally where they are coming from. And you can imagine in a warfighting environment, the ability to identify where adversarial signals are coming from would be a big boost. Different kind of thing entirely. We have helped a company that has just come out of stealth mode recently, developing lithium sulfur battery technology. And our help to them was to double the capacity of their initial prototype production facility or qual unit production facility so that they can ship more qual units to commercial and defense customers for evaluation purposes. So those are just 2 examples that, one is in a communications related technology and sensing. Another one is in the energy storage space.
Fantastic. They both have very apparent defense usages there. So Abby, I want to flip that question around a little bit, given how many things that NSIN has been helping here. Can you give us examples of some of the mission customers that you've helped to engage with to find solutions and bring innovative companies to?
Sure. As mentioned, we have worked with a lot of DoD customers within the acceleration portfolio the last 5 years. Our database is tracking that we have engaged with 683 DoD mission partners. So it's quite expansive. Of most recent, and actually I think they spoke today, we have worked with NGA to help them find solutions for their technology focus areas. And we have done that in a couple of different ways. But it spans the gamut for those of you who didn't have an opportunity to listen to the session just a few hours ago, I think. Looking at artificial intelligence, looking at alternatives to GPS, just the huge gamut of things that they're looking to find solutions to help them. And then also 5G. So we've worked with the Marine Corps and the Navy on helping them to understand 5G technology, setting the stage for the future, along with UAV technology is one that we have coming up with Naval X and NPS, just to give a couple of examples.
Love the 5G one. We participated in that, had fun doing that too. So one of the challenges, NSIN is growing so fast across the US, and they're engaged across multiple mission areas. As you mentioned, you got 11 separate regions. That can be really daunting to a startup or an early stage company trying to figure out who to talk to, who's interested in my kind of technology. what is the best way for a company to begin to engage with NSIN? Should they look for a technology piece, or should they connect to their local piece? How should they go about doing this?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So I think that, for a well-known, well-established venture, meaning that it's got, a good solution, I think keeping apprised of our events. So, upcoming accelerators that we're launching, we post on LinkedIn, we post on our homepage on the events tab, with ample time for companies to apply to participate in those particular programs. So along the way, they'll receive traditional accelerator curriculum, but they will also be exposed to DoD customers to help them understand the DoD problem set as it relates to that particular mission area that we're recruiting for. If you do not see a particular event that's coming up that has a mission problem area that your solution will help address, reaching out to your regional network team representative, which can include the university program directors or the regional directors, to let them know about your solution so that they can keep you in mind for future programming. I think is a great place. We have a newsletter that folks can sign up for so they can be apprised of upcoming opportunities as well.
Great, thanks. Tex, a similar question to you. So not only how does a company go about the best way to engage with NSIC, but what if a mission partner has, a mission organization has something that they think you can help them with, a technology company that they'd like to get moving forward?
So engaging with NSIC is really pretty simple. You go to the website I mentioned, nsic.mil. The information you need to determine whether what you are working on is potentially of interest to us is right there with the technologies of interest. We describe in pretty good detail the actual process that you would go through. And what you submit to us is basically the kind of pitch deck that you would submit to a venture capital firm. So it's pretty easy to find us. We're just right there on the website. Our office is in Mountain View, but like so many people, where we're located physically doesn't really matter right now, and probably won't matter that much in the future. We're accessible to anybody, anywhere, most anytime during working hours in the US. So it's pretty straightforward. You do need to have, when you submit to us, a pretty clear idea of where you think there is a defense application for your technology. That's something that you've already needed to have thought about, in addition to the commercial markets that you intend to go after. And you really need to have a clear sense of what the value proposition is. Why would this be important in the commercial market you're targeting? Why would this be of benefit to the Defense Department? We're typically focused on companies that are early stage enough that they aren't likely to be on the radar screen of a DoD component. What we try to do at NSIC is to understand what the services, the combatant commands, R&E, the organization that we sit inside of at DoD, what those technology priorities are, what the broad issues are that they're trying to solve over a period of probably the next 5 years. And then we try to, through our process, find the companies that are developing those technologies and help them get to the point where those technologies are matured or those products are matured and they will be relevant to a service or a combatant command at that time. So we're a little different. We don't typically start with an explicit, narrowly defined problem within DoD, but we are in effect trying to shoot ahead of the bird a bit here and make sure that there's something available to the Defense Department when they can use it and when they need it.
So perhaps if there was a startup that had a customer that was interested in it, I could just get an endorsement or some kind of reference that would come in with it, my submission to you?
So we love it if there's already indication of defense interest from either, for example, and we haven't really talked about this in this panel, but the SBIR program. The military runs lots of SBIR award processes, and we take that as a sign if a company has received a phase 1 or a phase 2 that that's a signal of at least some interest. And then we also talk with our counterparts in the innovation ecosystem within DoD, for example, in AFWERX or NavalX, to understand companies that they may have run across that are too early stage for them but look pretty interesting. and they say, you might want to take a look at this, and we'll do that on our own path. We do a lot of networking efforts, just like a venture firm would, in order to try to find companies in those technologies of interest that might fit our profile.
Great. So Abby, we actually have an audience question that came in for you. So what are the different compliance frameworks are most important in the cybersecurity realm or for NSIN? So if I'm a startup that's trying to get into this space, what should I be thinking about before I start approaching NSIN?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it depends upon the DoD mission partner that we're working with. Each DoD mission partner has a different set of network restrictions and a different authority to operate process. I think that as you're writing your software, it's really difficult to understand within the Department of Defense what those processes look like and how to ensure that your code will be compliant. And so I think that as you are embarking down that path, getting engaged with a dual use accelerator program to help you understand and navigate the specific requirements of the DoD mission partner that you would like to work with.
Okay. And Tex, we've heard a lot of this year about the Trusted Capital program and the Trusted Capital marketplace. How is NSIC different than this, and how do you partner, collaborate, or how do you integrate with that whole process?
So Trusted Capital Markets, TCM, fundamentally was about trying to put together to create a marketplace, if you will, of companies, startup companies, and investors that have been vetted to ensure that they can be trusted, that they are not adversarial either on the company side or on the investor side. So it's a process that they put companies through and investors to check backgrounds, if you will, and make sure that this is from sources that we're comfortable with, and that the key technical members of the startup company are people that we can feel good about. And then this is a place for those companies and investors to connect. NSIC is really an investor, if you will. We're a funder. I like people to understand that we look like a venture capital firm, but technically what we do is we provide prototype development contracts, but we actually provide dollars to put into startup companies, which is different from TCM, which is more kind of a clearinghouse and a meeting place.
Well, great. I want to thank you guys very much for doing this. I really appreciate it. It's great to hear more about NSIC as you guys are really getting up to speed now. It's wonderful to hear some of the investments you guys are making. And of course, Abby, it's always great to hear that how NSIN is progressing now into actually managing and delivering portfolio results, not just exploring, but really trying to drive things into the defense market. Thank you both for being in here, and we really appreciate you joining us here at the Supernova.